If you've ever wondered how some quarterbacks just throw the most perfect spirals and you want to be able to do it too, stay tuned because I'm going to show you the techniques that will get you throwing effortless spirals on command, no matter what your current skill level is or which football you're throwing. By the end of this video, you'll have learned everything you possibly need to throw perfect spirals and be able to figure out why you're struggling to throw them consistently. Before we get into the techniques, you must first understand what makes a football spiral. The tip of the ball must point in the same direction and trajectory that you're trying to throw throughout the duration of the release. If you can accomplish this while adding spin to the ball, you'll throw a perfect spiral every time. If the ball changes orientation as it leaves your hand, it's going to come out wobbly. It's literally that simple. Let's talk about the techniques that will help you achieve a perfect spiral and some of the main causes for bad spirals. Now that you know how to make a football spiral, the main key to doing it consistently is doing the same thing every single time. To be repeatable, you must eliminate variables from the equation that don't contribute to throwing perfect spirals. As I go through these techniques, pay attention to those additional variables that tend to happen and cause wobbly passes as mechanics break down. Let's start with the grip. I've seen quarterbacks throw with many different types of grips, but as long as these elements are consistent and the same, they're still able to achieve throwing a spiral. Me personally, I put my middle finger and my thumb in line with each other. My ring finger, first knuckle on the second lace, and I'm gripping it with my fingers, not my palm. That should leave a little pocket between your palm and the ball. Remember, with your fingers, not your palm. And you don't want to squeeze too tight. Keep a light grip. It doesn't matter exactly where your fingers are placed. It's up to what's most comfortable for you. But these elements of having a light grip, gripping it with your fingers, and your grip giving you the ability to release the ball and keep it in the same position are the keys to making it spiral. Now let's get on to the wrist movement, because the wrist movement is arguably the main key to throwing consistent spirals. This is often the #1 place that people have breakdowns, causing wobbly passes and ducks. You never want to throw with a weak wrist. You always want to keep your wrist flat or slightly strong. When you throw with a weak wrist, look at where the tip of the ball is pointing as I come through. It's pointing way off to the right. So let's talk about how to achieve the perfect wrist position and be consistent with it. It all starts with your pre-throw position. So as you set up and you're holding the ball right here on that platform, make sure your wrist is locked, and it should stay locked throughout the duration of the entire throw until you go to release it. If you watch NFL quarterbacks, almost every single time in their windup, the ball is pointed down or right here, but their wrist is locked in a position. Another key point about your pre-throw position is you want the ball to be pointed slightly forward. You don't want it to be pointed back behind you. From this position with it pointed slightly forward, I bring it back with my wrist locked and I come through and it's pointed directly at my target. Now let's talk about the second part of your wrist movement. As you release the ball, you must pronate your wrist. So if you hold your hands right here, pronation is when your hand moves so your palm faces downwards. So as you go to throw and release the ball, the bottom of your hand should be pointed right at your target. I go from here and then you pronate, almost like you're pointing at your target. This is gonna cause your fingers to come off the ball one at a time and make sure your middle finger and index finger are the last fingers to leave the ball, which is gonna add rotation to the ball and give you a good spiral spin rate. Next up, we have the arm action, because that's another variable that could affect how consistent you are throwing spirals. You should have a repeatable, consistent arm action, making sure that every single time as you come to release, that point of the ball is facing at your target. And now we have the follow through. There's multiple ways to think about it. Depending on your arm angle, if you're sidearm, boom, you're out here. If you're way over the top, boom, you're picking the left cherry. If you have kind of a neutral arm slot, you're right here, right thumb near the left pocket, near the left hip. The follow through is important because if you hit your follow through every single time, it's gonna ensure that you're releasing the ball the correct way, keeping it in the same position while adding spin to it. Let's talk about a few things to avoid that will cause a breakdown of spirals. If you grip the ball too tight, you're squeezing real hard, it's gonna be very difficult for the ball to come out of your hands smoothly. That's why it's important to keep a light grip. If your left shoulder is swinging open through the release, it's also gonna cause the point of the ball to deviate. So you must make sure that your arm isn't lagging behind your body. You don't wanna pull this away to get your arm through. To be consistent with this, you must stay in rhythm. If you're throwing with good rhythm, and you're moving in sequence, you should be able to easily execute a perfect spiral consistently. And the last thing to avoid is trying to add power and velocity to your throw with your wrist flick. Flicking your wrist is not going to increase the velocity of the ball. Throwing a good spiral and it cutting through the wind is going to increase the velocity. So if you're trying to flick really hard through the ball, the more likely it is that you're going to knock the ball out of that good orientation pointed towards your target while you're trying to release it. The wrist flick should be smooth. All right, now let's talk about why it's difficult to throw spirals spirals on deep balls sometimes? Now the answer is actually very simple. It's because a lot of you guys don't tilt your shoulders when you throw. Remember, what's the main key to throwing a spiral? Keeping the ball pointed at the direction and trajectory of your target throughout the duration of the release. So if you're here and you're trying to throw a deep ball, you're pushing the ball up that way, and the ball isn't pointed the direction that you're releasing it at. You have to tilt back a little bit so that you're releasing the ball that way. Now the other key to throwing deep ball spirals is correct sequencing. And that goes back to the things to avoid that we just talked about. If you're pulling your shoulder away, you're getting on your front leg too early, you're losing power through your hips, you're gonna try to overcompensate for that with your arm and your wrist through the release, which is likely gonna cause the ball to get knocked out of that position and then come out wobbly. You have to sequence correctly and make sure you're getting your power from the ground up through your hips and not just trying to whip your arm through. Now I have to address why the ball turns in the air sometimes. The ball is always going to turn slightly just due to the way that it's rotating through the air and the way it cuts through the air. The number one cause, wind. A lot of times, the direction of the wind is naturally going to make the ball turn this way. And that's something that you can't always control. You must understand how the wind is going to affect the ball flight. The other main cause is you might be throwing with a weak wrist. You're going to release the ball already pointed to the side, and it's going to stay there. Now let's talk about some drills that will help you practice being more consistent in throwing spirals. The first one and the easiest one that everybody that has a football can do is just lay down on your back and lightly toss the ball up to yourself. If you're serious about throwing spirals, there's no reason why you can't practice this every single night. The next drill is even feet. Set your arm at 90 degrees right here, tip pointed at your target already, and just flick your wrist. Once again, your shoulders stay still and you're literally just releasing the ball, practicing keeping it in that same position as you add rotation to it. The next step beyond that is a full arm motion, again, keeping even feet and trying to keep your shoulder platform very calm. And that's another key point that I must touch on is your shoulder platform. We talked about it a little bit earlier, but if your shoulders are moving rapidly through the release, it's gonna be difficult for you to consistently throw a spiral. You must have a calm shoulder platform through the release. Now, if you've ever done the warm-up drill where you face opposite of your target and you turn back here and throw, you may have noticed that it's very easy to throw spirals doing this drill. The reason for that is you have to keep this shoulder here to be accurate and get it to your target. If you don't believe me, go try it for yourself. I hope you learned something from this video. If you did, please drop a like, drop a comment, subscribe to the channel if you want more content like this. And if you're still here at the end of this video, I don't know what you're doing, grab a football, go call your friend, go get some practice in. Let's throw perfect spirals. All right, I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.